Everybody's got their own hysterically reductive overreaction to what happened in the midterms yesterday. Everybody's got their own single factor pet explanation that ties the whole thing up with a pretty bow on top, which is, of course, the same thing that always happens the day after the election. But you know what all the expert analysts seem to have missed this time with this one? The fact that, as a practical matter, this midterm was pretty much exactly the same as the last midterm. The party with the very slim majority, with their president in the White House, they lost the majority, but the losses were nowhere near as severe as historical precedent said they ought to be, nor indeed as severe as the pollsters told us to expect they would be. And are there new trends that we can start to infer from this now that it's happened multiple times in a row? I think there probably are. The new trend seems to be that the president's party still always loses seats in the midterm, but not as many seats as was once the norm. And most crucially, in my judgment, the performance of the ruling party seems to have become more disconnected from the performance of the president, which is an interesting phenomenon. A president as terrible as Joe Biden, who's currently the leader in the clubhouse for the title of worst president ever elected in his own right, allegedly, despite not having reached the halfway mark of his term in office, whose approval rating has been squarely in the shitter for many months now. It used to be a hard and fast rule of politics that a president like that can expect to get his party's ass kicked up one side of the continent and down the other when the midterm rolls around. And it was true as recently as 2010, but it ain't true anymore. And even though this is supposed to be National Reductive Single Factor Analysis Day, the reasons for it are probably quite abundant and richly deserving of discussion. So, since none of the people who do this shit for a living seem interested in doing it, I guess we might as well, right? So, before we get into the high-minded analysis, first there is this. I woke up this morning, reached over, grabbed my phone, started scrolling through some election results. And you know what the first question was that popped into my head? Swear to God. Not joking, folks. I thought, what's the procedure if somebody gets elected to the Senate and they're incapable of reciting the oath of office? Like, are you allowed to do it in sign language, or can you use a teleprompter? I also recall that at the start of the last Congress, you remember when they relaxed the dress code so that female members could finally have the right to bear arms? Which was a disastrous mistake, in my opinion, because the number of women in Congress whose deltoids I wish to see is roughly 0, but at least they don't have animal fur on their arms like Joe Biden does. But can we expect a similar dispensation now for hoodies and sweatpants so that Senator Mongo doesn't have to change out of his I'm cosplaying as a rural Pennsylvania meth addict costume? And that's why you come to this program, ladies and gentlemen, for the questions every other commentator is not depraved enough to ask. Jim Eagle, hit my music, please. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where it just now occurs to me, if you put Fetterman in a black cowboy hat and a leather duster, he could be a dead ringer for late-period Undertaker. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant. Now, is there good cause for reasonable people to be freaking out over the result that we witnessed yesterday? No, not really. The most important thing, from where I am sitting, is that the Dems will no longer be able to do what they have been doing these last 2 years, which is using a razor-thin majority to ram through all manner of irresponsible, destructive, economy-wrecking spending bills on straight party line votes. The second most important thing is congressional committees, both real and fake, they can no longer be used by Democrats as vehicles for targeting the perceived enemies of the Joe Biden regime. And that's a good thing. Whether the GOP won a 1-seat majority or a 101-seat majority, those were always going to be the two best and most important eventualities, and both of those things are going to happen. When the calendar flips to 2023, Nancy Pelosi will never, ever, ever again be the Speaker of the House. And my God, if you can't be happy about that, I got nothing for you. Some of you people, I swear, you act like you just got your face bashed in with a hammer by a disgruntled male prostitute. Sorry, random home invader. Now, Democrats will not be able to pass any major legislation for the next 2 years. If you need a reductive single-factor takeaway from this election, let it be that. Where Democrats currently have a 10-seat edge in the House, the Republicans are going to have probably a 15 or 16-seat edge when the new Congress is seated. So in practical terms, this is really just a role reversal more than anything. As far as what Joe Biden can do vis-a-vis executive branch policy and executive orders and whatnot, Republicans wouldn't be able to do much about that, even if they had won as many seats last night as they wanted to, because if your majority, if it's anywhere between 218 and 288, you ultimately are in the same spot with regard to the amount of leverage you have over the president. You can pass legislation all the livelong day, but if he doesn't like it and he vetoes it, you don't have the votes to override. But you probably don't care all that much about the chess game between the legislative and the executive branches. I expect what you want to hear from me is what I think this portends for the Republican Party and for the American conservative movement more broadly. Maybe I shouldn't even call it the conservative movement. Maybe it's more accurate to call it the grand coalition of the anti-woke. Now, you want to know why Florida had a frickin' red tsunami yesterday under the leadership of Governor Ron DeSantis? Because DeSantis is a guy who understands the big picture from the 30,000-foot level. He knows the actual battle lines have not really all that much to do with the false dichotomy of Republican versus Democrat. He knows that we are in a struggle of civilization versus anarchy, of civil society versus libertinism, of normal, decent parents and families versus child-grooming sex pervert lunatics who want to trans the kids and put gay porn in the school library. So when DeSantis gave his victory speech last night, very early in the evening, probably before dinner, probably less than half an hour after the polls closed, because he crushed Charlie Crist in his garish orange spray tan like a goddamn bug on a windshield. But you didn't hear him say, he didn't say we defeated Charlie Crist. He didn't say we defeated the Democrats. He said we defeated the woke. And we will continue defeating the woke, because wokesterism is evil and it's disordered and it serves no legitimate purpose. So it's our job, not as Republicans, not as conservatives, but merely as right-minded people of conscience, to keep standing against this monstrous ideology until it has been deservedly eradicated and consigned for all time to history's dustbin of terrible ideas that were once briefly fashionable. Over at the fake news media performance art clown show, they've got two dueling contenders for their reductive single-factor explanation for yesterday. The only two possibilities they confidently tell us are, one, that the Democrats outperformed because this was a personal repudiation of Donald Trump, because the bad orange man is very orange and very bad and very man. Or two, lots of single-issue abortion voters materialized at the last moment, incandescent with rage over the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and their numbers were so vast that it limited the damage for the Democrats. Because sure, as you look around the United States of America in the first week of November in the year 2022, and you survey all of the societal problems that afflict us, and you try to settle on what you think the number one worst one of all is, it's perfectly reasonable that you might arrive at the answer, not enough abortions. That's what our problem is. We do not have enough abortion. And I had lots of time to think about this as I was walking from my residence to my polling place, as I was getting mugged twice by vagrant smack junkies, raped by an illegal alien, caught hepatitis from tromping through all the human feces on the sidewalk. But it really gave me a chance to ponder how much the moral condition of our nation would be materially advanced if we just figure out a way to have more abortions. So yes, it goes without saying that the esteemed professional political analysts on the mainstream fake news networks are doing yeoman's work as ever. And they are a credit to their profession, each and every one. You want to know my reductive single-factor analysis on this thing? Oh, do you? Good, I was hoping you might ask. I think this is conservatives and conservative-leaning independents signaling just how little faith they have in the Republican Party's ability, nay, even its inclination, to be an effective vessel for the advancement of the things that conservative voters would like to see advanced. Because how many Republican governors, aside from Ron DeSantis, do you hear calling these things what they are? How many do you hear saying wokesterism is bad and evil? We don't want to understand it. We don't want to accommodate it. We don't want to conciliate it. We want to defeat it. Because that's what you do to evil things. I can't think of any governors who have said that, and I think it was the governors' races last night where the Democrats overperformed most of all. Coincidence? I think not. How many states except Florida have banned sex reassignment surgeries for minor children? The priorities of the Republican Party are wildly incongruent with the priorities of the people they presume to represent, and I think these results really bring that into focus. With a totally dominant ass-kicking performance in Florida, and mostly underperformance and apathy in the remainder of the country, the national GOP has gone after the Biden administration very forcefully on the economic issues and the border security issue, as well they should, to name a couple of safe examples. But would Ronna McDaniel ever tweet out something like, "Cutting off the healthy sex organs of minor children is evil and should be against the law"? Would she ever tweet out something like, "Our elementary schools are infested with teachers who are child grooming sex perverts"? Would she ever tweet out something like, "Children have the right to be raised by a mother and a father who are married to one another"? Hell no, she wouldn't. We all know she wouldn't, because the national GOP long ago stopped taking principled moral stances on the things that actually matter to conservative voters. So when push comes to shove and election day rolls around again, when conservatives have spent the last 30 plus years watching a Republican Party that stands and smiles politely while the society and the culture are dragged constantly and inextricably ever farther to the left, you think those people you've betrayed for all those years are going to be inclined to show up and have your back? Newsflash, they are not. The people who should be your most faithful voters, many of them just stay home now and don't bother because you haven't given them any damn reason to bother. But the absolute worst way for the right to react to this election, and it's a thing lots of people on the right are already doing today, is to act like there has to be a choice between Trump and DeSantis for 2024. Like it's a binary dichotomy, like it's a choice that's got to be made immediately. One guy's got to be elevated, the other guy has to be thrown under the bus. But it doesn't have to be like that. And a pitched battle between Trump and DeSantis, the forming of opposing camps, is the absolute worst thing the conservative movement could do to itself. I am, in all likelihood, closer to the end of my life than I am to the beginning, and I think, perhaps selfishly, that I have earned the right to want nice things. And the nice thing I want is for no Democrat to see the inside of the White House for at least 12 years. I want the executive branch out of the hands of Democrats for a sufficiently long period that some of their damage could actually be undone. And there's a path forward where you can achieve that. The path is 4 years of Trump followed by 8 years of DeSantis. But if the two of them wind up having a knockdown, drag-out primary battle against each other, that's going to wreck the entire thing. I think it's very, very stupid that it's become fashionable lately among commentators on the right to say they want to toss Trump aside and go all in with DeSantis. And that talk has grown even louder last night and today, regrettably, which probably warms the cockles of every Democrat and fake news performance artist heart, if we're being honest. If Trump and DeSantis come to some sort of an understanding with one another, where they avoid becoming rivals, then the next 3 presidential elections are pretty close to being guaranteed wins. If they don't, then they're not. It probably is as simple as that. There doesn't have to be a false choice between the one guy and the other guy. We can have 4 years of Trump and 8 years of DeSantis. It's okay to dream big, and this is a big dream that is eminently achievable for once. DeSantis has just been elected to a second term as governor, and I think a lot of people forget just how ridiculously young he still is. He's still only 44, if I'm not mistaken. So there doesn't need to be any hurry with this guy. As far as age is, it's not like the window is going to close on him between age 44 and age 48. If anything, the window will just get bigger. For as fully formed as he already is, as a political figure, he still doesn't have an abundance of experience. For whatever his qualities are today, they will only be amplified and augmented by 4 more years spent adding to his track record as the most effective governor in the country in recent history, who single-handedly turned Florida into probably the reddest state in the union. A state that a few years ago Democrats thought was going to be in their column forever. As far as Trump goes, last night wasn't nearly as bad for him as a lot of people think and are saying on both sides of the spectrum. Now, some Trump-endorsed candidates won, some of them lost. If there was any rhyme or reason to it, it probably was like this. The candidates who talked about the things that matter in real people's lives, they tended to win. The candidates who droned on and on about things that happened in 2020, they tended to lose. And there is a lesson here for Trump himself, which I think he would do well to heed. If he wants to return to the presidency and to do it as easily as possible, he needs to take a cue from Governor DeSantis and make it clear that he is focused on fighting against the people and the things that conservative voters view as the major threats to their livelihood and their way of life. Which is to say, Mr. Trump, please, for the love of God Almighty, stop talking about the 2020 election being stolen. Even if you're right, it doesn't matter. You got yourself elected president in 2016 by talking about real things that mattered to real people. And that set you apart from everybody in both parties at the time. You made people believe that you cared about the things they cared about. You never sounded like a guy who wanted to run for president to even the score with those who had done you wrong. But sometimes lately, that is what you sound like, and it's not a good look. There is a big difference between help me make America great again and help me get revenge on those bastards who screwed me. You made it to the White House with every institutional force arrayed against you, including your own party, by having a consistent message of hopefulness and optimism. If you orient your next campaign around personal grievance or a desire for retribution, if you make it all about help me get back at those evil, evil men who stole the election, then you have disconnected yourself from the message that was the main source of your appeal the last time around. So again, if we revisit things 6 months from now, if it's the summer of 2023 and Trump and DeSantis are flaming each other on Twitter every day, that is the worst possible thing that could happen from the standpoint of someone who cares about making sure that institutionalized wokesterism perishes from the earth within our lifetime. 4 more years of Trump, then 8 years of DeSantis, and who knows, maybe at the end of his first term as president, DeSantis can do the thing that Trump should have done and announce that he's running for re-election as an independent. Because that's what it will take to, if it's ever the Republican-Democrat duarchy is to be smashed, it will take a sitting president renouncing his party affiliation and then winning re-election as an unaffiliated guy. It can't happen soon enough, frankly. Has a party ever been more loathed by its own voters than the Republicans currently are? Because I don't think so. I mean, if you're looking to explain a lack of voter enthusiasm, is it really that difficult to figure out? But there is some encouraging news from last night, some other encouraging news, I should say. At the top of that list is the fact that the political careers of Robert Francis O'Rourke of Texas and Stacey Abrams of Georgia are both mercifully at long last over. $177 million they spent between the two of them this year, and God did they both get their asses kicked. It must be terrifying for people like that who don't know how to do anything except run for office, when you wake up one day and you've lost every election there is to lose and there are no more offices to run for and you're left as a middle-aged person with no recent work experience, no useful skills of which to speak, habituated to a life of giving speeches begging for cash, doing TV interviews begging for cash, and calling people on the phone begging for cash. You're basically a high-class panhandler when you get right down to it. And there's another encouraging aspect of last night's results. The most absurd people on the left, your O'Rourkes and your Abramses and so on, they went from being fairly competitive candidates 2 years ago to just getting run over by the fucking bus this year. Just completely shit-rocked. And you can call me terminally optimistic if you wish. But I would submit that those are signs, albeit little ones, of a nation perhaps, slowly recovering some semblance of its collective sanity. Thanks very much indeed for watching. Have a pleasant tomorrow. I will see you Friday. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.